know about you, but I have always wanted to hear the most upper-class British accent say the words GST on homes for first-time homebuyers. So clearly today is my lucky day. Because today, Canada sent the United States a clear-eyed message about our sovereignty. That's right. We had King Charles fly over from his home in another country, England, to read our government's priorities.
It will cut the GST on homes at or under $1 million for first-time home buyers.
Now, before any monarchists who are watching start to feel their head explode, I do recognize that King Charles is the head of state of Canada. And he did affirm Canada's sovereignty several times in the speech, especially with the one line that made all of the headlines. He called Canada the true north, strong and free. But overall, the speech was so boring, I think many of us would have rather watched paint dry. Even Charles's eyes seemed to glaze over as he was reading it. Unless, maybe he just looks like that. But boring isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially in this world. And if you can push through the boredom, you can actually tease out some takeaways for us all. And luckily for you, I watched it, so you don't have to. Now, the speech was mostly written by the Prime Minister's office, though the King and his staff would have had to sign off on what he was gonna read. So he wouldn't have said anything he wasn't comfortable with. And there were also a few parts that weren't written by the Prime Minister's office. Like in his opening to the speech, where he interestingly actually did a land acknowledgement, stating at the outset that they are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, which he called a, quote, recognition of shared history as a nation. I am not Indigenous, so this gesture is not one for me to accept, reject, or overly interpret, given all the pain and colonial trauma that the Crown represents. But it's notable that it happened, and I'll be interested to see how Indigenous folks feel about it. In this personal opening, the King also acknowledged Canada's, quote, renewed sense of national pride, and highlighted his admiration for our, quote, unique identity. Both of those statements sound like an acknowledgement of our sovereignty, though he didn't explicitly mention the 51st state stuff. The rest of the speech, which was largely, as I understand it, written by the Prime Minister's office, laid out the government's priorities and, as expected, didn't really hold any surprises at all. The stuff that the King read was mostly stuff that Carney had promised during the election campaign. Promises to make Canada more affordable, to reduce spending, though instead of explicitly mentioning AI for once, the speech just highlighted how the government will be, quote, deploying technology to improve public sector productivity. But that is the context in which the Prime Minister has talked about AI pretty much every other time, so I think it's safe to guess what the technology they're referring to there is. The speech also highlighted the importance of building homes, building new international relationships, moving on nation-building projects, enhancing security at our borders, toughening aspects of the criminal code, capping immigration, doubling the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program, protecting the Charter, nature, and the French language. Now imagine all of that and some more stuff read really slowly in a very proper English accent. Sorry, I can't do it. And that was basically the throne speech. The King, once again reading royal approved words written by the Prime Minister's office, also specifically mentioned the President of the United States, saying the President and the Canadian Prime Minister have, quote, begun defining a new economic and security relationship between Canada and the US, rooted in mutual respect and founded on common interests to deliver transformation benefits for both sovereign nations. In case you don't remember, transformational was that word that Carney used to describe Trump's presidency to date to his face, a word that can be interpreted as good or bad, but in the Oval Office, Trump interpreted it as a good thing. So it was quite funny to hear that word used again, this time coming out of the King's mouth. King Charles also wrapped up the speech with the quote that, as I mentioned earlier, everyone put in their headlines. Quote, as the anthem reminds us, the true north is indeed strong and free. Take a listen.
As the anthem reminds us, the true north is indeed strong and free.
Anyways, Mark Carney seemed absolutely delighted with the visit. Look at that smile. But others were less than thrilled about the speech itself. Like Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who called for, quote, talking points to be replaced with, quote, real plans, which is hilarious coming from Mr. Axe the Tax himself. But here's a little clip of what he had to say.
In other words, let's replace the talking points with real plans to get it done.
The NDP, meanwhile, said that while there are aspects of the throne speech that they support, overall it was conservative light.
This is not a worker-centered throne speech. I guess another way to put it is it also struck me as a bit of a conservative light throne speech.
As for the Bloc Québécois, well, many from their province are not big fans of the monarchy. And as for the throne speech, leader Yves-François Blanchet called it a massive push for the centralization of Canada. Here's what he said.
It is the most important initiative by a federal government towards centralization that I have seen or heard of. I do not believe it is ill-intended. I believe that Mr. Carney sees himself culturally as the CEO of Canada.
All right, that's the throne speech done. And to cap off his day, Mark Carney is heading to the CBC studios to do an interview with Power and Politics. As I'm filming this, it is 4:35 p.m. Eastern, so by the time you're watching this video, it will have definitely already aired, and I'm sure that CBC will put it on YouTube. But if it makes news, I'm not going to talk about it until tomorrow, because it hasn't happened yet. I also reached out to Mark Carney's office, who confirmed to me that he will be in attendance for question period tomorrow. So that should be very interesting to watch. Although it sounds like he's not going to take up his predecessor's tradition of answering every single question in question period on Wednesdays. But still, it'll be interesting to see if he loses his patience, if he's calm and collected, if he's funny. I'll be watching and I will let you know tomorrow. Before you go, there's one last really important story that I want to highlight for you. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith seems to be setting the stage for a US-style book ban in schools. She made a social media post announcing her push to ensure, quote, age-appropriate books in school libraries. She puts a graphic content warning off the top and then claims this is about protecting kids. And a little tip, Danielle, if you have to say this isn't about banning books, it's probably about banning books. Now, we're not idiots, despite what Danielle seems to think. We have literally watched these exact kinds of policies play out to the south of us. And surprise, it has resulted in disturbing levels of censorship and book bans. We see right through this, Premier. It's bullshit. And so is, by the way, any future claim you might try to make about being pro-free speech or anti-censorship. That's everything I had to say today. I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, what do you think of all of this?